Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating topic, the potential return of American expansionism. We're looking at proposals and ideas that were floated for a second Trump term and asking a big question. What happens when 19th century ideas crash into 21st century geopolitics?
It sounds like a question straight out of a history book, right? But what if it wasn't? During Donald Trump's presidency, this very idea of one country just buying another jumped from the history books right onto the front page, and it sparked a very real debate with huge implications.
And make no mistake, this wasn't just some off-the-cuff remark. These ideas were part of a broader vision, signaling a potential major shift in America's foreign policy, one that was all about reasserting dominance, especially in its own hemisphere.
Okay, so let's dive into what's actually behind all of this. At its core, these proposals were built on a doctrine that looked way back, more than a century, for its inspiration.
It was officially called the Trump Corollary, and what it did was explicitly bring back the old Monroe Doctrine from the 1800s. You know, the policy that basically told European powers to stay out of the Americas. The goal was to reestablish the entire Western Hemisphere as a U.S. sphere of influence, and to really drive the point home, Trump actually became the first president ever to use the term manifest destiny in an inaugural address.
And if you want to understand the philosophy here, this quote from Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller really says it all. It's about as blunt as you can get. The message was clear. America is a superpower, and it's going to start acting like one.
So, how did this big idea actually translate into policy? Well, it led to a series of really bold, and you can bet, controversial, proposals that targeted very specific places on the map. And as you can see, the scope here was, well, it was ambitious, to say the least. It stretched all the way from the strategic high north of the Arctic down through the Americas and even reached into the Middle East. Every single one of these locations was chosen for a specific reason that fit into this new doctrine.
Now, the idea of buying Greenland, which first popped up back in 2019, came back with a whole new sense of urgency. This time, the administration was calling control of the island an absolute necessity for national security, and they pointedly and publicly refused to rule out using force to get it.
Then, down in Central America, all eyes were on the Panama Canal. The administration demanded that control be handed back over to the U.S. The official reasons were high transit fees, but the bigger issue was a growing concern over the influence of Chinese-owned companies that were managing ports on both sides of that critical waterway.
And this timeline just shows you how fast a situation like this can escalate. Look at this. A demand in December becomes a public vow to take it back by February. By April, a new security deal is signed that allows for U.S. troop deployment. And just 1 month after that, the predictable result, massive anti-American protests erupt all across Panama.
Okay, now let's talk about Venezuela. Policy discussions there reportedly went way beyond just sanctions. We're talking about actual plans for direct military intervention. One of these scenarios, which even had a code name, Operation Absolute Resolve, involved U.S. Special Forces going into the country with the express goal of capturing President Nicolas Maduro.
So you might be asking, what was the strategic thinking behind all these moves? Well, the reasons were a mix of national security, controlling valuable resources, and good old-fashioned geopolitical competition, especially with China.
And the key thing to understand is that each location offered something different. For Greenland, it was all about its location, perfect for missile defense at Batufix Space Base and its huge untapped potential for critical minerals. But for Panama, it was about controlling a major global trade choke point and pushing back against China's growing influence in the region. As you can probably guess, these proposals didn't exactly fly under the radar. The international reaction? Well, it was swift, it was widespread, and it was overwhelmingly negative.
This quote from Greenland's Prime Minister, Moot Borup Ageda, just perfectly captures the spirit of the resistance. It's such a powerful, firm declaration of national identity and their fundamental right to decide their own future.
And that feeling? It was definitely backed up by the numbers. Just look at this polling from the targeted countries. I mean, the levels of opposition are staggering. A full 90% of Canadians and 85% of Greenlanders were against annexation. 81% of Panamanians wanted local control of the canal. These are not close margins at all. And all of this created a really clear geopolitical divide. On one side, you had traditional U.S. allies like Canada and the EU condemning the moves as violations of sovereignty. France even offered military solidarity to Denmark. But on the other side, rivals like China and Russia jumped on the opportunity to accuse the U.S. of bullying.
But the pushback wasn't just diplomatic. It got pretty satirical, too. A Danish petition to buy California for $1 trillion, complete with the slogan "Mocha California Great Again," quickly got over 200,000 signatures. It was a clever way of turning the administration's own rhetoric right back at them.
So what about back home in the United States? Well, these expansionist ideas were anything but universally popular. The American public and Congress were, to put it mildly, deeply divided.
Public opinion polls pretty much tell the whole story. A solid majority of Americans just weren't on board. Take a look at the chart. Only 13% supported annexing Canada. Support for getting Greenland was a bit higher at 22%, but that still left a massive 76% of people opposed.
And this number right here is absolutely crucial. When you specifically ask about using military force to do any of this, support just fell off a cliff. A YouGov poll found that only 4% of Americans were okay with forceful expansion. Just 4%.
And this massive split in public opinion was perfectly mirrored on Capitol Hill. You had Republicans introducing bills with names like the Make Greenland Great Again Act to greenlight the administration's plans. And then, on the other side, Democrats fired back with things like the No Invading Allies Act to try and block any military action without their approval.
But on the issue of Venezuela, something really interesting happened. The prospect of direct military action actually created a rare moment of bipartisan agreement. Senators from both parties, like Democrat Tim Kaine and Republican Rand Paul, came together to co-sponsor a bill. Its purpose, to reassert Congress's constitutional power over the ability to declare war, a direct check on the executive branch.
So what are we to make of all this? This whole period of assertive, expansionist thinking brought back a concept from deep in America's past, and it leaves us with a really fundamental question. Is this just a brief historical echo of manifest destiny, or could this actually signal a brand new and lasting shift in American foreign policy and its role in the world?